The access restrictions section, as the name suggests, allows you to specify access rights for users. It allows you to specify who is allowed to access the proxy, and how. That is, from specific IPs or ranges. If the user should be authenticated, how should they be authenticated, etc. Access restrictions allows you to create policies for authentication, create policies based on IP addresses, policies for access to the web GUI, modes of use, for example, transparent or explicit specification of proxy, permission to use connect methods for HTTPS sites or FTP clients, disabling of one or more filters, create policies for different interfaces on which SafeSquid service is listening, and profile the users for being uniquely processed in other sections. This section has a global section and two subsections, allow and deny. If the global policy is set to allow, all users are allowed free access to the proxy, except the ones that are specified under the deny subsection. If the global policy is set to deny, users explicitly specified under the allow subsection are allowed access. Users specified under the deny subsection are denied access, even in this scenario. In SafeSquid versions that support Windows integrated authentication, the global section also allows you to explicitly enable or disable NTLM authentication. If this option is enabled, SafeSquid allows access to users that are already logged into the domain without authentication, but records their user ID. You can, however, specify which users or user groups are allowed to access the proxy in the allow subsection. The default access restrictions global policy is usually set to deny. But, as you can see, an entry in the allow section allows access to all users. Let us now add an entry to the allow section to see what options you can define for allowing access to users. Click on Add under the Allow subsection to add an entry. Each entry in the SafeSquid interface is conveniently explained with its content-sensitive tooltip help. Just move the mouse pointer over the feature that you would like to know about, and a tooltip pops up to help you with the feature. The first option, Enabled, allows you to enable or disable individual entries. If this is set to disable, the entry will not come into effect. You can use the comment field to add your remarks, for example, to explain what this rule does. This can be useful for your future references. Profile tracing allows you to trace the profiles that are getting applied to the requests that are hitting the proxy. This option should only be enabled if you would like to trace a profile-related problem. The Ldap Profiles option can be used if you have integrated SafeSquid with an Active Directory or Ldap server from the Ldap configuration section. You can define attributes to which this entry should apply. For example, you can define a security group here, like CN equals administrators. Leave this option blank if you do not want to apply this entry to any specific group, or if you are not using any Active Directory or Ldap server for user authentication. The interface option allows you to specify a specific IP and port on which SafeSquid is listening on, if you have configured SafeSquid to listen on multiple IPs or ports. If you have configured SafeSquid to listen on multiple IPs or ports, then you can use the interface option to define specific IP and port that this entry should apply to. In the IP address option, you can specify a list of client IP addresses, or IP ranges, or a combination of both, separated with comma, that this entry should apply to. Leaving this option blank will apply this entry to any, or all client IP addresses. System authentication option must be true for authenticating users from Active Directory or Ldap server. In such cases, you can even apply this entry to specific users by entering their Active Directory or Ldap ID in the username field, in a regular expression. The password field should be left blank, as SafeSquid will verify user credentials from the authenticating server. In case you would want to authenticate users, but either do not have an Active Directory or Ldap server, or do not want to use them for authentication, you can even create a local username and password, simply by changing system authentication to false, and entering a username and password in the fields below. You must create multiple such entries for each user. You can specify one or multiple options here if you would like to narrow down the scope of user access. For example, if you would like the administrator group to access the proxy only from a range of IP, you can specify both these options. This will make sure that the administrators group is allowed to access the proxy only from this range, and not from anywhere else. The Access section allows you to specify what privileges the defined users have. If Web Interface is selected, the defined user or group will be allowed to access SafeSquid interface. This option should only be selected for users who would be managing SafeSquid. The next four options decides if the users will be able to make regular requests to the proxy, like HTTP, Connect, or HTTPS, or SSL, or FTP requests. If Allow Bypassing is selected, the users can make use of the special SafeSquid URL command, XX-bypass, to bypass all filters. This option is usually provided to proxy administrators for diagnostic purpose. The URL command option should also be selected if you would like the users to be able to use the bypass command. Selecting URL command will allow the user to use a number of other URL commands, like XX-profiles, XX-filter, XX-score, etc. For more details on URL commands, check the documentation section on the SafeSquid website. You can bypass specific SafeSquid filtering sections for the defined users from the bypass option. When any of these filtering sections are selected, the defined users will not be applied any filtering policies listed in the selected section. This option can be used either to track what section is blocking certain content, or to allow unrestricted access to the users. The Interface Username and Interface Password options offers a second layer of security, and allows you to allocate an additional username and password for accessing SafeSquid interface. Finally, the Added Profiles option allows you to allocate a profile to the set of options that you have defined in this entry. The profile that you add here to this entry can then be used in the various SafeSquid sections to define what the users are allowed or denied from accessing. For example, if you have defined Ldap Profiles to accommodate users from the administrators group on the Active Directory server, you can add a profile and administrators to this entry. Then you can use this administrator's profile in various sections, like URL filter, MIME filter, or cookie filter, to define what is to be allowed or blocked to the users who belong to the administrators group on the Active Directory. This enables you to very efficiently allocate granular access rights to users and groups. Click on the Submit button at the bottom when you are done. As you can see, the new entry is now added to the Allow subsection, below the default rule that allows access to everyone. The Access Restrictions section works from the top to bottom hierarchy. The first entry that matches a request is applied, and the rest are ignored. Therefore, the new entry that we just created will never be applied, as the default rule will match all requests. If you do not want anyone other than the administrators group to access the proxy, you can simply edit the default entry and make it false to disable the entry. You can then create additional entries to allow access to other users. I hope this tutorial was helpful for you to quickly understand about SafeSquid access restrictions section. We will be adding more videos on access restrictions to explain it in more details. In the meanwhile, feel free to visit SafeSquid website at www.safesquid.com and check out the documentation page for further details. Thank you for watching this video.